Okay, I'm Kevin O'Neill. I am the current first district at large city councilman. I ran on a working families platform. I have spent the last 30 years as the publisher and editor of the Labor Beacon newspaper, which goes out to about 40,000 union members throughout the area. I took that responsibility very seriously, and I've brought that to City Hall. My first election, I didn't have an opponent. I think that what I bring to the City Council is pragmatism, good sense, and strong work ethic. I've kind of run on my my platform consists of basically everybody should live in a safe neighborhood, and I think I've worked very diligently with everyone on how do we do that, because it's a difficult, when we're facing probably the largest, I think we are at a murder rate now larger than the worst year in the history of Kansas City. So something's not working. And one of the things that I helped shepherd through was a budget item of $30 million at $5.5 million or $6 million a year for the next 5 years will go to preventive violence, to preventing violence. And we have RFPs going out that will actually have organizations that do work in the communities that help people that need help, mental health issues, et cetera. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited that Stacey Graves, our chief of police, just instituted some new policies out of the NOVA game plan from back in, you might remember in 2014, we had KC Nova, which was a combination of organizations on the streets, in the community, the police department, the mayor, the city council, and everybody was working on behalf of curbing violence. And we ended up having the lowest number of murders in the last 20 years. And that year, I think we had 78 or something like that. Why would you go away from that? And I'm just disappointed but for the last 6-7 years, we stayed away from that. So she's bringing that back. I'm very excited about that. I did want to say one more thing, because I didn't touch on one thing that I do think is important, and that is the Housing Trust Fund. And we have $50 million. We allocated $50 million in a bond issuance, and that's gone into the Housing Trust Fund. And one of the things I worked with the KC tenants on, and we don't always see eye to eye, but I do respect what they do. And we worked on an old apartment building down in the northeast section of the city that was evicting several refugees and immigrants. And the ability to go through, we met with the members of that community, and there was like 10 families or 8 families with 5 to 7 people within that, in these very apartments that were in need of great repair, right? And an out-of-town developer had bought them, and he was kicking them all out to evict them, and then he was going to, I think they were paying like $400 a month rent, and he was going to kick them out, redo them, and then charge $1,000 or $800 a month rent, right? So these poor people had they didn't speak English, they couldn't really negotiate with anybody, they didn't know what to do. KC Tennis stepped in, God bless them, and they worked with them, they got translators, they talked to the landlord, they got some time off, some time to work with them. And then they brought us in, me and Eric, my colleagues Eric and Andrea, and we went to a meeting with all of them. We talked to them, and we saw there was a real need for help here. And we ended up, to make a long story short, we ended up working with the developer or the owner who was going to evict them, not to evict them, and we signed a contract so that we will pay half that rent. Instead of the $450 that they were paying, they're still paying the $450, and we're covering the other $400 for 2 years. It's a stopgap solution to a difficult problem, but that's what the Housing Trust Fund should be used for. It should have different purposes every time somebody has a housing problem. That's what it should be used for. And I was really appreciative of my colleagues for seeing that, and we were able to help these immigrants and these refugees that really needed it. Today we passed out a a budget item that will add. We are going to work with Jackson County to build a jail along with them. I don't believe we want to incarcerate people, but there are people in this city that need incarceration. And if we can get a couple hundred beds in the city rather than having to ship them down to Vernon County or Johnson County, Missouri, which is an hour ride both ways, this gives an opportunity for family and everyone here to visit them. And it's just important, and it saves the taxpayers about $100 million. So I'm very excited about that. So I grew up in a family of 7 boys. My father, I'm a 5th generation. My great-grandfather was a city councilman here back in 1920. My father was one of the group that started the St. Patrick's Day Parade here. My brother started Irish Fest. We have a very rich history in politics. I'm the first actual politician in the family since my great-grandfather. But I think we're all working people, and I grew up off Troost, right about 55th Street, and now I live north. So I think there's a connection here where you're an at-large candidate and you actually understand both sides of the river, which unfortunately not everybody does. They kind of tend to stay on their side of the river. We are a city of barriers. We have Troost on the east side, which separates white from black. We have state line that separates Kansans from Missourians, and we have the river that separates north from south. So I do hope that we can get better at breaking down those barriers. Yeah, I mean, probably the first goal is I do believe in development, and I think we have to keep developing to remain a major league city. And I'm not real happy with our planning department and some of the things that they do, and the permitting process is so long, and this is in the weeds, but it's an important process of growth. And Northland is where majority of the growth is taking place. And my district is everything north of Berry Road, which means that I have the airport on one side, the soccer park in the middle, and everything over to Liberty. So I want to keep that growth going. In 1972, when we built the airport, everybody expected growth to just generate out of that. It didn't. For 50 years, we've had limited, stunted growth in the Northland going north to the airport. So I think we have taken some steps to increase that, and I think that's important. And I think that we do that every day on the council. I will say I listen and respect Melissa Robinson, one of my colleagues, very much. And she has a very strong platform on how she wants to see the city, and I agree with a lot of the things she's encompassing in her view. And I hope to work with her and many of the other council people to continue. We just did a project. They have a project called Meta out in Northland, and there was some real questions on goals and a lot of issues, but we ended up yesterday taking charge and making sure that they are hiring local MBEs and WBEs, and that's very important. And so I'm the inclusivity, the diversity, those things are so important as we go forward, creating workforces that look like the population, creating opportunities. I come out of the labor industry, so jobs are so important. And when you look at violent crime, when you look at crime, when you look at all the statistics, the one great thing that always is a deterrent to high crime is jobs, good jobs. And I do believe that with my contacts in the labor, and I've been able to do this through the last 4 years, is to work with labor, providing jobs in some of the underserved areas, and I will continue to do that. Because the workforce is in dire need. We need workers, and we need to have people that are in these underserved communities that don't have access to jobs. We need to get them access. So my first 30 days, I want to get the processing of the permit process and the planning department under a new division. I just think cultures can be disastrous to departments, so I think we have to change the culture in that department. That's one of my first 30-day options. The second is I want to see more growth in the Northland for certain things. Just rooftops and continuing the growth out there. That's a 60-day, 90-day, 4-year plan. And the last thing is, I want to make sure that the $30 million we set aside to combat violence is utilized correctly, and that we actually get some movement on that and try to reduce crime. I just don't know how we can continue to say this is a great city if we have record numbers of murders every year.